Welcome to the My Wool Mitten podcast. My podcast about life on a small farm in the middle of Michigan's Lower Peninsula, where I live with my husband, and our family is quite close around us. We have a small flock of sheep that we raise for wool and yarn and for pasture management. We have a few laying hens, a grumpy old retired barn cat, and of course our wonder horse, Kyle, who, if you've watched the podcast episodes before, you've probably seen. I think this will be coming to you on the 1st of December. That's my plan anyway. And that will probably be the last podcast for the year. There might be a couple of short ones throughout the month just to stop in and say hi, but otherwise I'm planning to wait till after the first of the year. Be back again in 2020. And so if this is your first time viewing, welcome. I hope you'll stay around. And if you see something you like or have questions about or don't like, be sure to reach out and contact me, and I'd love to visit with you. I appreciate comments and feedback. You can follow me you can find me most often on Instagram. I apologize if you can hear my husband in the background. He's on the phone with his nephew and he's getting pretty wound up in there. So if you hear some racket in the background, it's him. He's very loud anyway, and the older that he gets, the less well he hears, so he's quite loud. I just heard him hollering. I actually restarted this because I thought he was calling me, but he's just on the phone. Anyway, I'm getting off track. And again, welcome if you're a new viewer. If you're a regular or returning viewer, I'm so glad to have you back, and I appreciate you guys so much. I thought I had intended to save this till the end, but I think I'll start right out with this and get it out of the way, and then we can go ahead with the podcast. I did decide to continue podcasting. I appreciate all the feedback that you guys gave me. I took it all to heart. I listened to everything that you had to say. And really, it does come down to the fact that I do want to keep podcasting. I enjoy it myself. Like I said, even if only one or two of you watched, I'd probably still do it. Where I was getting a little indecisive was with the new rules and regulations that YouTube is coming up with. I'm not going to say an opinion one way or the other. They are the rules and I will abide by them. I was just a little confused about the vagueness of them and where our podcast fell into these new rules and regulations. What I've decided going forward is that I don't record these episodes intending them to be for children. When I'm recording, I'm intending it to be for other adults, whether young adults or older adults like myself or anywhere in between. That's who I'm speaking to when I'm recording it. It's who I have in mind when I'm talking about it, no matter what the topic is. And so that is how they will be labeled going forward. This isn't intended to, there's nothing harmful to children here, but my intended audience is not children. And so that's how we'll label this going forward. I believe that means that you will still be able to comment. I believe that means you still will be able to follow any links I put down below. If that's not the case, I'll go back to doing show notes on my blog, and then you can follow links from there. You can find me on the internet at Instagram as at mywoolmitten, and I usually have links, or I'll put that somewhere on the screen. I'm mywoolmitten on Instagram and Ravelry. I don't do Twitter, and I don't use my Facebook account, so that's the best way to find me, to reach out and say hello. I'm not sure how comments are going to work going forward with this. Think that you'll still be able to comment, but I'm not exactly certain. And I think the kinks and the bugs will get worked out, and we can go smoothly ahead. So anyway, with all that being said, let's be done with that important stuff, but not fun stuff, and let's go on ahead to knitting. And there'll be knitting content in this episode. There'll be a little reminiscing, and I think if I don't ramble on too long, there'll probably be a little bit of barn talk, sheep talk, bucket talk, sheep anyway, in the video towards the end. So let's settle back. I apologize for the poor lighting. I apologize for my creaky chair. I apologize for the furnace going on and off and the glare on my glasses. And like I said, I apologize if you hear my husband getting loud in the background, talking on the phone. So all of that aside, let's go forward with some knitting. You guys know how much I hate glare on my glasses when I'm talking to you. And it's just about as dark as daylight can be out here to still have it be during the daylight hours, but it's still just coming in these windows. I have two huge windows plus a glass door over here. So I finally just thought, I can see a little bit. I'm just going to put the glasses up. If I have to read something or count stitches, I'll flip them back down. But anyway, so I was talking about knitting and a conclusion I've come to about myself and my knitting. No big surprise, but maybe it's more a case of giving myself permission going forward. I apologize to I think every chair I have is a rocking chair. And this is an old creaky wooden rocking chair. So I fidget, you might see me rock and I apologize, or even if I just move a little, it creaks. So I apologize about that. But back a little while ago, I was working on a couple of things. I was doing a pair of socks. I hadn't knit myself a pair of handmade socks in a while. I was working on a pair of fingerless mitts, and I was working on a test knit for a sweater that was done in fingering weight yarn. And I told myself I wasn't going to start anything new until I'd finished, especially the test knit, because that was a obligation that I had, that I felt that I needed to fulfill. And I was starting to dread knitting, and I was making silly mistakes, and I was finding any excuse not to. One thing about it was I really got into spinning and processing some fiber, and so I did get more of that done. But I finally sat down to work on this, and I had been working on this test knit sweater for a long time, and it just seemed like I wasn't getting anywhere. Now, I've said before on the podcast, I'm pretty sure, that I would never knit a fingering weight sweater for myself. I'm a big girl, quite a big girl, and so the thought of knitting forever and ever and ever to make a sweater that would fit me just didn't appeal to me. And I'm also a loose knitter, and I like a loose gauge, and I thought, I don't know that that would be a very attractive sweater on me either. So I've knit a few sweater patterns that call for fingering weight that I've just, done the math and converted to work with DK weight yarn. I even had started a sweater, a year or two ago with sport weight yarn, our own farm yarn. And I abandoned that about foolishly about 2/3 of the way through, just because the more I got finished, and I could try it on, I thought, I am never going to wear this. I just don't like it. So anyway, that's my long rambling way to say that it finally occurred to me, all of those things, plus coming across an old half pair of socks that I had knit a long time ago with hand spun yarn, and I could only find one, and it's pretty well felted on the bottom and worn thin in a few places. But I thought, my hands are getting a little arthritic, my shoulders get a little sore. I'm just not happy knitting with fine yarn. And so I'm not going to. I talked with the pattern designer, and she was very understanding of the fact that that I just wasn't going to be able to finish the sweater. I ripped out the socks and rewound the yarn. I did finish the fingerless mitts, but by the time I got to the end of them, my hands were cramping so bad, and I was just frustrated with them, even though it was just a straight knit pattern. So it made me kind of rethink things. And once I was able to take those things off the needles, clear them from my plate, it was like such a weight had been lifted. And that was when I immediately cast on for this sweater, the new Mitten sweater. It flew off the needles. It was a dream. The yarn, I mean, I even ripped back, not because I'd made mistakes, but just because I wanted to change a size or change a color, which, by the way, if I didn't mention before, no problem tinking back or ripping back with the new Mitten and reknitting with it, none whatsoever. But I used a light hand on it. But anyway, that was like a door opened for me again. And I was just filled with joy. Now, in the meantime, when I was doing the spinning, I also had spun up a couple of little batches of yarn, my own yarn mostly, or our own farm yarn from the Corriedale. And I was just sitting around and thinking, I'm going to knit something with this. My spinning was a little inconsistent, a little bit thick and thin. It was 2-ply yarn, and so it was nice and poofy and bouncy, but not real consistent. So I thought, well, I'll work on something that that won't really matter for. So I started a project with that, and I also had in my mind to start the little holly wristers that I showed you in the last vlog that you all seem to really like. A free pattern that was written by my friend Anna, who is Caledoniana and also Fish Trap Creations podcast. And she has made some fantastic patterns. I can't recommend them highly enough. She's not charging for them yet, and she really could. She has some of the most beautiful sock patterns. But with this one, I'm not normally a Christmas knitter. There's some little Christmas patterns that come out that I kind of like that, maybe have a little fir tree design or something, but these I did want to knit. And hold this one up. Hers pattern was written for wristers. I made them actually a fingerless mitt. I put a little thumb hole in. And the only thing I wished is that I'd made them full-length mittens, because I just love them. I may even go back and pick up and do some fingers, make them gloves. I don't know. It's an idea. But so you can see that mine are a little bit longer. And the other thing I want to say about the pattern is that it called for fingering weight yarn. It called for 60 stitches, I believe, the cast on. I did 42, so a number divisible by 6. And this is, the white is about a sport weight yarn. That's held single. The green and the red is Jameson Smith, and I just held it double. Excuse me. And I actually started out with 48 stitches and got about halfway through it and was fooling myself thinking, oh, this is okay, this is okay. But as I was trying it on, I thought, no, it's going to be too big. And I'm weird about my mittens. I don't like a tight-fitting mitten. I really don't like a tight-fitting mitten. And I don't like it at such a tight and dense gauge that it feels like it's binding on my hands. But so I've gotten into a really bad habit of being sloppy and making mittens that are too big. And then they're not really comfortable either. So anyway, I stopped, ripped back, and recast on. I left 48 stitches on the ribbing because I wanted that to be able to kind of go over the edge of my sleeves. This is kind of a short sleeve, but so it can go in like that. And then just decreased before I started the pattern. So, that's really simple to do. If you love a sock pattern or a mitten pattern, but you want to make it in a bigger gauge yarn, well, just find a number divisible by the number in the pattern and cast on and go from there. I used size 3 needles, which I'm not sure what millimeter that is, but US size 3. And the only other change that I did to the pattern is that Anna has you start, you finish this contrasting color, in my case green, and she has you start right away with the little red holly berries. And when I did that, when I did the larger number of stitches, when I was looking at it, I thought, oh, I wished I'd have put a row of white in between before I started. So when I ripped it back, that's what I did. I just thought it shows up a little better. Otherwise, it blended into the green a little too much. And when it came time to doing, I debated on putting an actual thumb in. Instead, I just made the little thumb hole. So at this point, I just worked back and forth till I had an opening for my thumb and then rejoined in the round and went around. But Anna, this pattern is brilliant. Your little texture stitch, I don't know why, it just makes me so happy. And it goes so well with the little motif So if anyone out there is looking for a pattern, she has matching socks, and I'll talk more about that in a minute too. But if anybody's doing like a Christmas knit along, or they're participating in some kind of a knit along and they need a pattern for, I say check this pattern out. It's very simple and it's just adorable. And show Anna, who is Caledoniana, as I said. Obsti on Ravelry, OBSTI, I believe. But there is a Fishhead Creations podcast group on Ravelry as well. But show her patterns some love. She has a thistle pattern that I really want to make, and she has another fingerless mitts pattern I want to make. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say about that. And I cast on right away for the other one. Don't know where my head was at. I cast on for that one. I do a tubular cast on. And if you've done a tubular cast on, you cast on originally half the number of stitches that you need. Well, I cast on half the number of stitches I needed. So I was knitting away on my second mitt, and I thought, did I get the wrong needle size? No, I was knitting on, instead of 42 stitches, I was knitting on 24 stitches for some odd reason. So took that back, recast it on. So, but that's the other thing. It literally took just a few hours to make one of these. So once I figured out my numbers and just got going to knit. So anyway, love, love, love this pattern. So I'm going to talk more about the sock pattern that matches this in the next segment, where I talk some more about this knitting. But I need to pause for just a minute, and then I'll be right back, I promise. Well, I don't promise, because who knows what might come up, but I'll be back. Let's press on and see if I can get this done before my battery dies, because I notice it's getting on the low side. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about with knitting, I mentioned about knitting with thicker yarn, thicker needles, and this kind of goes along with the Christmas theme, I guess. Knitting socks and Christmas traditions and that kind of thing. And I had a photo of my sister and my brother and I when we were small. When we were kids, there were no fancy embroidered or quilted or store-bought or handmade Christmas stockings. Our Christmas stockings were a clean pair of my dad's boot socks or hunting socks hung up. We didn't have a chimney either. It was usually hung on the stairway. But that's what we had all the years that I was a kid. And up until there were 5 of us, and that's what we had. And I don't know that my mom ever read Little House on the Prairie, but I thought of this years later, because we always got usually an orange in the toe of the sock, a little bit of chocolate, the little candy canes, and sometimes, like a little package of mixed nuts or something like that, along with our other toys. But those were always in our stockings as well. So anyway, I got to thinking about that, and I also remembered a pattern that I had used in the past for some boot socks using hand spun yarn. And I thought about my dad's socks. They usually had that stripe on them. They were usually kind of a gray. Sometimes he had just white ones and they had red stripes or something. But so I showed these last time. There are mistakes. I did a really sloppy job with my stripes coming together here, but I was trying to see actually how fast I could whip these out. Didn't take long at all. So this is all hand spun, and it's fairly thick. The white and the cream color was really thick and thin. I didn't do a very good job spinning that at all. So I carried that double, and I also doubled the red. I almost think that the red is the same white over dyed. The gray is just our gray Corriedale yarn and spun up, but makes kind of a nice marled look. The first one that I did was this one actually. And I did a gray heel. This was some brown that I had spun up. And this was the same gray that I did the other socks in, held with a strand of the white. And that was a little bit too marly looking for me. But anyway, nice and cushy. I'm not intending these to be stockings hung on the fireplace though. I was intending to wear these. Now, my silly daughter stopped over to have a cup of coffee early in the morning the other day. It was bitterly cold, and she came in with her slippers on and no socks. So I tossed these over to her, and these have been worn. She wore them home, and I had to pry them off of her to get them back to have for the podcast. So they'll be going back to her. But anyway, I had said to you about some knitting. I know a lot of people cast on for a Christmas sock. A lot of people cast on to knit beginning December 1st. Why not treat yourself, especially if you're a hand spinner, but even if you're not, to knitting a nice, thick, cozy pair of socks? If they don't work for you in your boots or your shoes, wear them around the house like slippers. This particular one, now I'm a U.S. women's size 9 foot, and I have a fairly narrow foot and a high arch. I like a heel flap and gusset and just a regular toe. But anyway, yeah, I just cast these on, and I wasn't even particular. I grabbed what I had. I was thinking I'd need to cast on with 10s. Then I thought, well, for the ribbing, I might want to cast on a little smaller. I think I used an 8, a 9, and 2 10s to cast on. You know, that's hardly any difference. It's fine. Don't stress about it too much. Just cast on and go. And let me slip my glasses down on my head for a minute, because I wrote this down to tell you, because some of you asked. This was a sock recipe, and it was from, and I don't remember the issue, but years and years ago in Spin-Off magazine, they dedicated an entire issue to knitting hand-spun socks in all different ways. And this was one where the lady said to knit nice, thick, warm boot socks for everybody in her family, that if she had hand spun of all different sizes, which if you're a hand spinner, we have. If it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, she just carried it together. Maybe it was 2 strands, maybe it was 3, some was plied, some wasn't, but to just get a general even thickness for the socks. And so I remember doing that, and I thought about it again. For some reason, it came back to me. So for this particular pair, I cast on 28 stitches. Like I said, I had 2 10s, an 8, and a 9. I did some ribbing for however long you want to do the ribbing. And then I changed to my colors, which, like I said, in this case was kind of a marrow spun yarn. And then I did use size 10 needles. And this is only 27 rows before I started the heel. And I just threw in some stripes. And I actually kind of messed up, and they're not the same. See, one is a little bit narrower than the other, but doesn't matter. So that's what I did for those. That's just the recipe. And I had so much fun doing them, and they're very comfortable. My daughter loves them. I want to have some more, so I'm going to use some more hand spun and do some more. But I think what I'm going to do next, and this is where the little hollyberry pattern comes in, that I did of the little wristers that Anna made. And I have to apologize. I keep saying that she's Fish Trap Creations podcast. It's Fish Head Creations. I don't know why I get confused, but anyway. I'm going to make, I have some more of the white hand spun. I have some more of the red. And then I could come up with something green or blue or something close to it. I'm going to make the nice thick boot socks, but in that hollyberry sock pattern that Anna has. And I'll just cut it down to a number divisible by 6. So what do you guys think? Do you want to cast on a pair starting on December 1st or sometime this week? This isn't actually officially a knit along, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. And this is so comforting to me to think about. I think about my dad and his boot socks. I think about my mom washing Dad's socks and hanging them up for us kids. And when it got to be that there was 5 of us, Dad probably had to buy an extra pair of socks, so he had them for inside of his boots. I don't know why it made me think of Dad's his boots were like barn boots, chore boots were like, I think they were John Deere brand at that time, but they were like an olive green tall rubber boot that he wore to the barn, or that he wore out hunting. And I don't know, it made me think about those sitting on the basement steps, and Dad's coat hanging there, where he'd go up and down to put wood in the fireplace. I thought of my mom thinking of little gifts for us to have for Christmas. Both of my parents are gone, and they have been for a few years now. But for some reason this year, I think I miss them more than I have in a lot of years past. So just thinking about some things that, make me think of them. Anyways, before I get all teary-eyed, that's my some more of my thick knitting, fast knitting, semi-Christmas stocking, slipper socks knitting. So if you guys would like to join me, if you want to, and if you put a picture on Instagram, maybe use the hashtag #mywoolmitten, and that way I'll see them, or tag me when you post them, because I'd love to see them, or just to hear about the fact that you're doing them. So I think that's the only other knitting content that I had to share. Oh, but one other thing I wanted to say, and this kind of goes along with maybe Christmas presents, is I have mentioned them before, I think I've even shown before, but if you are thinking about a Christmas gift for yourself or for another knitter, if you don't already have these, because a lot of knitters do, think about going to Schoolhouse Press, which is Meg Swanson, Elizabeth Zimmerman's website, and pick up some Elizabeth Zimmerman books or some Meg Swanson patterns or some of their DVDs. Just treat yourself. The Knitter's Almanac is one of my all-time favorites. I've worn out a copy. I've gifted these. If you never knit a pattern from this, just sit down and absorb her words. You won't be sorry that you did, and it's very inexpensive. I also have, and I have them on DVD. I think you can download them or stream them or something too. I have several of the DVDs. I have at least 2, maybe 3 of Meg's. I could listen to Meg Swanson talk all day. A dream of mine is not to travel to some far-flung country to attend a knitting or spinning or fiber event. It's to go to Wisconsin to one of the camps and just sit at the feet of Meg Swanson. I keep wanting to say Zimmerman. But I also have, this is one because it has both Meg and Elizabeth in it. I watch this over and over and over, and I learn something every time. And it's a joy to me because my daughter and I knit together a lot of times. The sweater that I showed you that she knit part of, I'm finishing up. So that's something that we bond over and share as well. So it really touches my heart to see. So think about those if you have a knitter on your Christmas list, or just to treat yourself. So I think I'm going to get ready to close this segment of the podcast. Like I said, I have a little bit of footage of the sheep and some jobs that I did in the barn the other day that I'm going to show you. And then I'm going to close, I'm going to read you a few lines from Knitter's Almanac and close with that, with our knitting. And wish you all a beautiful, happy, wonderful December. Thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for thinking of our family. We'll be back in January with a full podcast. I'll see some of you on your vlogs because there's a few of them that I want to watch. And other than that, I think we'll just be here quietly trying to make our way through the days. We have some changes coming to our life and to our farm and just going forward. And I think in January I'll be ready to share with you about that. So that's something for you to look forward to. And if there's other things that you want to see more of, if you want to see more of the sheep, if you want me to talk more about caring for the sheep, if you want me to talk more about, I don't know, any part of it. My focus has always been on this podcast to talk about aging in place on this farm, how we have to make changes to fit into things that we're no longer able to do physically, financially, even mentally. So I just want to say again how much I appreciate you guys. Thanks for stopping back. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for your feedback. And I'll turn you over to the sheep and then to a little bit of Elizabeth Zimmerman and some works in progress. And then I think we'll be done. Take care, guys. Been a beautiful day here today. I know that the landscape doesn't really look like it. The video doesn't really show how promising the sunshine is. But I thought I'd take a little clip before I go and show you what I was doing in the barn today. Funny how many oak leaves are still hanging on, isn't it? That's the brown leaves that you see back in the woods there. And let me turn up here. See, a little blue sky. Last night I stood out on the porch after dark. Actually, when I came in from chores, I did chores a little bit late and listened to the owls in the woods. And there's our woods over here. And quite often, if the moon's bright enough, I can see them in the top of this tree, which is on the fence row, or over here. And they were quite worked up about something. And they were so loud that they actually echoed. It was beautiful. So I stood and watched the Big Dipper, I think, up in the sky and listened to the owls. There's been times in the past when Bill would call me out on the porch and the owl would be perched on top of this barn roof and we could see him outlined against the sky. I had worried when we sold some of the property a few years ago, the person who bought it came in and ripped out some trees that were on the property line where the hawks had always nested, and the hawks moved back here into the woods more, and then I didn't hear the owls for a while. But they seem to be back. And that is an amazing sound. And then I woke up in the wee hours of the morning and came out on the porch for some fresh air to see if I could hear them. Sure enough, they were just talking back and forth. And then I was scared to death because the deer that have been coming up in the yard and eating my perennials were snorting at me and stomping their feet. And if you've ever heard a deer snort and whistle, it happens at the same time. I about fell down. I thought, good gravy, somebody's standing here in my yard. And then I quickly realized it was the deer. So anyway, so since it was a nice day today, I worked outside. You know, even though you know winter is coming, there's always those things that you just don't get done in the yard. So I worked on some of those, putting away some things over in the other barn. And then, I don't know if you kind of remember, I should have took a before picture. When I took the picture down here to show you where we're getting the water dried up. Which, that was underwater that I showed you before was all across the center section. So I'm going to try to keep the sheep out of there as much as I can. And even though they could all fit at this feeder and another small one, I had this feeder empty. It was just sitting out here, so I moved it over, and let me tell you, that's no easy task. Bill built that for me years ago out of hardwood, and it was built to withstand rams and big sheep knocking against it, and it has, but it's nearly impossible to move. The only way I could move it by myself is because there's not a big pileup of manure in here right now, and so I could lay it on its side and drag it. There's Petoskey, the ram, and Ninja, the only fin sheep I have left now, other than I have the crossbloods. So chickens haven't gone to bed yet. Fed them a little early tonight because I've got some things to do tonight. But anyway, that was another thing I did, and then it doesn't look like it because the chickens have been scratching, but I raked this up, and I've brought these guys in early, and I see that I forgot a string. It's not in danger of falling on the ground. Hi, Francie. So maybe it doesn't seem like a lot, but I have to do little steps at a time, and a couple of jobs that got done. There are about 3 more that I wanted to cross off my list today that I didn't, and they're just simple ones, so maybe tomorrow. One of those jobs that probably won't happen this weekend, maybe next weekend over the Thanksgiving holiday, is getting coats on the sheep that are going to be coated. Not everybody's going to be. I think I'm going to leave Ninja uncoated. Remember, if you've been following me, that she had trouble with her wool last year? Of course, she had the quad, so I think there was, nutrition and hormonal, that she had some trouble. So I'm going to try leaving her without a coat. The fine wools are going to be coated, just because if no one bought the fleece and I had it for myself, I don't want to pick through all that stuff. So coats is a job that's on the agenda. Chicken's working in the fresh straw. I thought I might read to you from the classic Elizabeth Zimmerman's Knitter's Almanac, the opening passage for the December chapter. Is an exciting, new, improved Christmas every year really necessary? Is it in the spirit of the solstice? The human heart hankers after stability and tradition, the feeling and atmosphere of Christmas past, the anticipation of those to come, and the magic presence of Christmas now should all blend and blur to give the distraught soul something to hang on to in a year bedeviled by new improved machines, soaps, music, spectators, sports, and recipes, many of which will prove to be dull, destructive, and sometimes downright damnable. Let us try to keep at least Christmas the way it has been for generations, and infiltrate novelties delicately and with caution. As a good start, why not try to abide by the comforting tradition of handmade and homemade? Elizabeth Zimmerman, Knitter's Almanac. If that book is not already in your library, I just highly recommend it. I may have mentioned before that I've worn out one copy, and this one's starting to get pretty well thumbed through as well. I read it, I take comfort in it, and I continue to learn from it, even after all of these years. I hope that you have a beautiful, beautiful December. I hope to see you again maybe later this month, but definitely in the new year. Thank you again for watching our podcast, for encouraging me, for supporting me in my haphazard endeavors. Happy December.